Well, that was an incredible trailer for Netcode Warriors. I am joined by my co-host, Derek Fields, and right now we also happen to have the CEO and game director of Son Studios, Segun-Oside. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Glad to be here. How's everybody doing?
Doing well.
Okay.
Doing well. No, happy to be checking out this game. So, I mean, right off the bat, these are totally new characters, right? Totally new IP. Can you kind of
Correct.
walk
Yeah.
us through the entire development process?
Yeah. So we've been working on Netcode Warriors for since 2020. So it's been a hot minute. Early the kind of earliest days were a lot of ideation kind of phase. Like, what does this IP mean? Like, what is it about? Like, kind of figuring out some of the story and lore aspects, and kind of honing in like how we were going to reference our inspirations and things like that. Once we were able to kind of communicate with Watanabe-san and Moriyama-san, so those are the guys from Japan who actually worked on the Digimon IP. Kenji is like one of the original kind of creators and designers of the Digimon IP. Once we were able to kind of talk with those guys and get more of a hone in on the art style, I think that kind of like we were off to the races at that point. We also had other very talented designers. Ivan Fiorelli, famously, I think has done like some stuff for Fantastic Four comic. I think he was the penciler for Fantastic Four for a couple of years. Mitch Lucas has a pretty famous webtoon that's in development called Project Divider. So a lot of very talented artists kind of help shape the artistic vision of the game. My inspirations for art generally are always going to be based on my background. So I'm Nigerian. So for instance, the main character is Yoruba. I'm Yoruba, so the Yoruba tribe. That was important to me, but also bringing in some of the things from my childhood that really stood out to me artistically and stylistically. So very Shibuya punk and grind fiction inspired. You have a lot of like kind of streetwear and street culture kind of aspects that are kind of baked into some of the art and the especially the human characters, but then the transformations into these like larger than life like warriors. We call them code warriors. It's very Sentai inspired, very Power Rangers inspired. So those are like bringing in a lot of like aspects of things I grew up with, like Mega Man Battle Network and other franchises like that that really shaped the vision of like the IP and everything like that. But yeah.
Yeah, rock on. It's easy to see for me coming from like a similar background in terms of influences and the types of media that I was growing up with. Those influences, like they breathe all throughout Netcode Warriors. There's something that you nudged on that I would love to hear more about. One of my favorite topics is talking about cultural intersection and how these different inspirations can come together to breathe new life. You're directly interfacing with Japanese developers and artists within this project. And so can you expand a little bit more about what it's like to work, truly as a globalized studio?
Yeah. So, the whole studio is remote. I've always said, like, I don't really care where you come from. I just care that you got heart and talent, right? That's it. I don't even care too much, like, how much experience you have. Because I think it's very easy to fall into that trap when you're hiring somebody of, that whole thing, like, oh, well, I need experience to get a job. How can I get a job if I don't have experience, right? So for me, it's just if I see passionate people, talented people, I tend to reach out to those and try to see if there's, like, a way we can collaborate in certain aspects, in certain avenues. In regards to the globalization of everything, yeah, like, people from all over the world, from Spain, from Indonesia, animation team, the riggers, animators from Brazil, and so like your team is kind of worldwide, kind of by necessity, just because we want the best people that we can bring onto the project. In regards to working with the Japanese guys specifically, definitely language barrier was kind of hard to overcome. You're like translating emails back and forth, trying to make sure that you're not saying anything that they can be perceived as like offensive and incorrect. Like you want to make sure you're culturally sensitive to whoever you're speaking to and kind of the background, especially some of these guys who are very well known in the industry for the kind of work they've done. So yeah, it was very important for us to always approach those conversations with respect and make sure that the people who we're talking with, that they're creatively and artistically being fulfilled by the work we're asking them to do. Yeah, I'd say that's kind of our general approach to how we do stuff.
So, I mean, in game development, we all know it's not easy, especially when you're running a team, and especially when you have a globalized team,
Yeah.
like you do. Can you speak to a little bit of the challenges that kind of come up and kind of how you kind of triumphed over them?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I've got this part down 100%. I'm still growing, learning every day. Part of it is just trying to be as flexible as you can with time zones. Time zones can be a big thing, right? Sometimes I just don't get a lot of sleep, because I'm like talking with people in Spain who are 4 hours ahead, or Japan who are 12, 14 hours ahead, or whatever, right? So like sometimes it's me being up at 3 a.m. but needing to be up at 8 a.m. to do something, right? So that the reality is like sometimes it's a grind. It's really hard. It's difficult. It's mentally taxing. I'm sure my girlfriend would love to see me more. But at times, life demands that to achieve greatness, you must do great things, right? So yeah, I hold myself to a very high standard in regards to how I do work and how I operate and everything like that. And I can't expect everybody to put in 100% if I'm not putting in 100%, right? 110%, whatever I have to give, I give, because these projects that we're working on as a studio, they're very important to me. I'm very passionate about them. To me, Son Studios is poised to be like one of the next premier like fighting game developers, at least based out of the West, right? If we do things correctly, and if we make sure that we're precise and very calculated with how we do things, and that we put our heart into it. So that's kind of my approach to that.
As a fighting game, this means that we're entering into the fighting game community and entering into a nuance for things like iframes and move cancellations and like hitbox coordination.
Yeah.
I am arbitrarily gesturing at this as just a fighting game couch player. Dead or Alive was my game of choice, and I'm no longer good at any of them. But they bring such a nuance, and so what sort of nuance, emergent outcomes do you hope comes from Netcode Warriors, and in terms of how people play and engage with this game?
Yeah. So Netcode Warriors, right? Obviously, there's the stylistic kind of things that we're referencing, but in regards to the gameplay itself, I think that's actually where it shines, or where its specialness comes from, because we're making an arena fighter, which there's a lot of them out there, usually based on licensed IP, like your famous anime or whatever. But those games are usually designed for a more casual experience. They're not really designed to be competitively deep. It's more about getting to experience your favorite characters and play them in a way that's easy for you to do, and easy for you to switch from character to character and just do really cool stuff and kind of put it down and like add a good time or whatever. And that's not really the design goal here. The design goal here is for you to put hundreds, thousands of hours into like the game is like constantly revealing itself to you. And in that kind of design space, arena fighters haven't really had competitive spotlight before. I mean, there's one or two here or there, but they all kind of make compromises to kind of have that conversation with the fighting game community, I would say. And we're kind of looking at things in a sort of a different direction. Obviously, we're trying to incorporate some things like motion inputs are pretty big for us, quarter circles and things like that should just exist more usually in traditional fighting games that tend to not exist in arena fighters. We're putting those in, charge motions, and other things like that. But the idea of what an arena fighter is, or what it can be, is a real expression of freedom of movement in a three-dimensional space that 2D fighters just generally aren't really can't do in the same way, I'd say. And so even the 3D fighters that you're familiar with, like Dead or Alive or Tekken or Virtual Fighter, because jumping usually and crouching share an input, jumping, crouching, and stepping to the side share an input that limits how quickly you can move in and out of the foreground. And it's mostly about moving forward and backwards quickly with like intervals of that. That's why there's high level techniques about stepping out of the foreground. Netcode Warrior kind of approaches it more like there's a real freedom of movement, and the skill and depth is how the decisions you're making based on that movement. You can move wherever you want, but are you moving in the right place at the right time? You can move quickly, but are you quickly adjusting to what your opponent is doing and things like that? So that's kind of the design space that we're in regards to what Netcode Warriors is and what it can be.
I love that. We spoke a little bit earlier just about this being, again, a new IP that no one's seen before. Let's say we're fast forward, game is out, it's doing amazing, as I'm sure it will. Fandoms love to interact with their favorite characters. Do the Sun Studios have any kind of aspirations to take those characters and develop them for other forms of media? And like, what does that success look like for you?
Yeah, this is something I've thought about loosely. I haven't put too much thought into it, to be honest. But from what I've thought about, I do think like a companion manga makes a lot of sense. Like a one-shot manga, I think would be really, really succinct with the art style and the inspirations and everything like that. Would make a ton of sense. I think animation, like a short film, could also do wonders. I think also there's various opportunities because the designs are so wild and so like dynamic, and there's obviously licensing opportunities, like clothing, merchandise could be cool. The human characters have these very tech wear kind of inspired outfits, so something that kind of leads into that I think could be interesting as well. But yeah, mostly like manga, animation, novelization. I mean, those are all like valid avenues that one could pursue, or one that we thought about to some degree, but haven't put too much thought into because we're just really focused on making a good game with a good story first. Something I want to make sure is that I don't want people to feel like, oh, like I didn't get this, like I have to go do homework elsewhere to understand like the game I just played, like or the story mode I just played, or to understand the characters that I was interacting with. If that makes sense. Like we want like a full story experience, right? Like in Netcode Warriors. So
Really quick before I let you get in, Derek, I want to know. All right, are you keeping the story under wraps, or can you speak a little bit to the story a little bit right here? Because I'm a story guy.
yeah, I can talk about the story a little bit, but essentially, these people, right, humans from all around the world. So that's another thing, is that the cast is culturally diverse intentionally, right? They're from literally every character from somewhere else on Earth. Right, main characters from Nigeria. We got somebody from the Scandinavian region, some Japanese, some Taiwanese. Like American. Like they're all from different walks of life, from different parts of the world. They all one day, by happenstance, get like sucked into this alternate world called the network, right? And the network is essentially this living, sort of breathing world. Like when sometimes in lore and fantasy, you talk about like Gaia, Earth, as like a living, breathing thing. In this alternate dimension, that world is like alive, basically. And it's overseen by an entity called the Sovereign. And essentially, the laws of physics are kind of inverted in this alternate dimension, to where energy is an infinite thing, but physical matter is like more limited than it is here. The humans kind of quickly realize that like, oh, if we could funnel this energy to Earth, then we would have potentially unlimited energy, and shenanigans ensue. That's basically the gist, the kind of surface level gist of the story.
Love it.
Love a good story, and I'm glad that you expand on that a little bit. It relates in a lot of what I was thinking about. There was a nugget that you mentioned about the story, about a lot to do with the game's identity and the expectation of players committing an amount of time to it, so that they don't feel like that they have to do homework outside of the game to drive a connection with it. Games now are emerging in a space where let me rephrase and say, all media is emerging into a space where they are competing with each other. So whether you're a game or a cartoon or a movie, the attention space is like a continuously crowded economy. And so, looking to keep your players in this environment in hopes that they will dedicate that time and expand upon the story. It sounds like a huge undertaking, one that it commands, standing out with some of these other arena fighters that you were pointing to. What do you think about that? Emerging into a saturated space, emerging into a space where, the goal of keeping players attuned to the game is going to be really important. Are there other elements that are going along with the story to keep people coming back for more?
Yeah, I think the big thing, like the competitive kind of drive, the game needs to be deep, right? From a competitive standpoint, to have a sustainable player base, that sustains over time. I think another thing also is, like, at this point with most fighting games, like, you need to show your player base that you're gonna put more time into it outside of just the initial release. So you're gonna expect like some kind of downloadable content, whether it's more characters and things like that down the line, which are all things, conversations we're having and plans we're making. I obviously can't speak to anything definitively like that at this time, but all conversations we're having about how to make sure that Netcode Warriors is it's not just a game, it's an intellectual property, right? That can extend past just the game itself, right? Like whether, we get to make like a Netcode Warriors 2 or 3 or whatever, right? Like we've already had conversations about some of the story elements that would play into Netcode Warriors 2 if we got to make that. And we have some very interesting kind of, you know, fighting games are very hard to market. You need to show players that there's something, either you need IP or something unique or something they're familiar with, something to grab them or bring them in. So one thing is obviously like character designers who've worked at Marvel and worked in, Bandai and Digimon. Like that was like one pull. Another pull that I can't go into too much detail about, but I can basically explain is that we got some pretty prominent content creators in the fighting game community to agree to give to let us use their likenesses actually as characters in the game, as playable characters in the game. So that's something I'm super excited about, because I think it really creates this like fandom kind of relationship between the game and those content creators and their communities, right? That I think will really accent kind of the IP in an interesting way.
Cool. To remind folks watching, you are both the CEO of Son Studios and also the game director. So you're actually
Correct.
covering multiple projects at a time.
Yeah.
Talk to us about like what does your typical day look like when we're talking about literally being part of crafting the business, which is the games in your case, but then also having to operate also on the kind of business side of things.
Yeah. So, we're currently so fully self-funded. So I do have a day job that I have, that I do as well, that, allows us to, and myself and my other co-owners, we all have day jobs that we use that allows to fund the studio. So a decent amount of my day obviously is going to that, and most of my Son Studios related work is outside of that work day, generally speaking. I mentioned earlier I don't get a lot of sleep. I wasn't hyperbolizing. That's just like generally how things are right now. I'm the game director on both this and our other fighting game project, Saturday and Battle Manga. So I'm the game director on both of those projects at the same time, and so that does demand a lot of my attention because a lot of people need information about what to do, when to do it, and kind of making sure we hit our deadlines, our marketing kind of goals, and everything like that. So those are kind of different kind of facets that play into how my schedule lines up, but I don't have a specific like here's what I do at 8 a.m. and here's what I do, and because sometimes like things are the way they are.
Yeah, if you're creative, if you're a game director, we know that some of those regimented moments kind of feel like locking ourselves into a box. Jesse, it's been a pleasure to learn more about Netcode Warriors and understand what you and Sun Studios are doing for not only this, but the other projects that have been alluded to during this conversation. With the limited time that we've had, I've already learned so much, but is there anything that we maybe didn't get a chance to cover that you would like players to know about before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think, for us specifically, marketing has been a thing that we would like to do more of, right? I think we're planning on setting up, by the time this goes out, we probably should have like a Discord server people can join to kind of have community and talk with each other about the game and the characters that have been revealed and have more speculation about the story and different things like that. We want to, kind of announce some of the voice actors that we kind of had conversations with and cast for some of the roles and as well. So yeah, the game's kind of ramping up and the development's kind of ramping up in a very interesting way. I obviously cannot give a definitive release date for the game at this time, but the plan is to release it next year at some point. That I can say that now.
Yeah.
Next year, that's the plan.
Rock on.
Yeah.
Well, this has been terrific just chatting with you, getting to know a little bit more about you, about Sun Studios, and about Netcode Warriors.
I appreciate this conversation a lot, guys. It was a lot of fun.